Hi everyone, this is your host Annie Zhang, and this is Hello Metaverse. The term Web3 has become more and more solidified in the last couple of months. And while it's still very, very broad, we can all generally agree that it's an umbrella term for the development of all blockchain-based technologies. How do you, everyone, and their moms actively participate in Web3 is a whole other question. And a very important one, as Web3 needs to gain mainstream adoption to continue to be relevant. Peter Yang is working on tackling this problem through education. Through his journey of writing Web3 beginner-friendly content and guides, such as Curious Beginner's Guide to Crypto or Step-to-Step Guide to NFTs for Creators, he's realized just how important it is to ensure that people have a guided path when traversing into Web3. He's approaching education in a Web3 native way through the creation of Odyssey DAO, which is a learning community that creates curriculum and mentorship digitally. His hope is to bring the next 1 million people onto Web3 by making products feel more intuitive, showcasing the utility value of products and away from speculation, and minimizing bad experiences. In this episode, Peter will help listeners understand core Web3 concepts such as wallets, NFTs, DAOs, and L1 and L2s. We will also deep dive into his experience creating a DAO, its pros and cons, and a step-to-step guide on how you can start one as well. Apart from founding Odyssey DAO, Peter is also a product lead at Reddit and previously worked at Twitch and Meta. Here is my conversation with Peter Yang. Peter, welcome. You are right now a creator in Web3, having written your own Substack article and now creating a DAO in the educational space. It seems super, super cool from the outside, and I think a lot of people are really wanting to become Web3 creators themselves. Can you describe the reality of being a Web3 creator compared to, I guess, being in Web 2? And what are the actual pros and cons of it?
I think just the reality of being a creator is that it's kind of a grind, right? You kind of have to put content out there. You have to build your own community. And I didn't decide to become a Web3 creator. I became a Web3 creator because I believe that Web3 is the future of the creator economy. I think there's a bunch of tools that will allow creators and their communities to own the upside from their work instead of the platform. That's why I started tweeting and writing about Web3. One thing that's really interesting about being a Web3 creator is that you really do bring your community along. So for example, recently I had a kid and I had to step away from being a Web3 creator for a little bit. And people really stepped up in my community and produced content, hosted Twitter spaces, did a bunch of work in my absence. So it was really great to see kind of like the community continue to thrive even while I was out.
That's super awesome to hear. How would you say like the role and the method of adding value now in Web3 has changed?
I think the central premise of Web3 is that you can let people own the upside from their work, right? So there's like an ownership premise. But I think the foundations of just like having a mission that people resonate with, that people feel belong to, is still really important. I don't think people are contributing to my community like, oh, it's a DAO because they want to get some token. They're doing it because they believe that there should be a better Web3 on-ramp and there should be better education out there. So I do make an effort to try to compensate the people who are really putting a lot of work, but I think people are just doing it because they believe in the mission of the DAO.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, would you also say like people's roles tend to be a bit more fluid, or do they tend to like get into certain roles and functions and end up sticking to it?
Yeah, so one of the challenges is that I have a community of like 5,000, 6,000 people. And the most common question that we get is like, okay, how do I contribute to this community? And, you make fun of the big tech interview process a lot, but they do kind of like figure out what the person is good at, where the person is good fitting. And in Web3, it's more like a free-for-all. But I think the good thing about Web3, I'm not sure if this answers your question, is that you can just start contributing, right? You can start contributing. You can be like, hey, I'm really good at, writing blog posts, for example, and you can just like start making some Google Docs, adding some Google Docs. And at some point you can ping a core contributor, either myself or someone else to review it. And if your stuff is good, then, why not give it a responsibility, right? Like I have a person who just jumped into the community, starting writing a weekly email newsletter, and his stuff is actually very good. So I was like, hey, why don't you be the official email person for our DAO? So it's more like permissionless contribution.
Just out of personal curiosity, because in my day job, I am a product manager, and you've actually written a lot about product in the past. What do you think about the role of product manager? Do you think that that might be something that actually disappears in the future?
I don't think so, because at the core, product manager is like the glue of the team, is to make sure people are marching in the same direction. It's kind of like the facilitator to kind of like help build your products. I think that still very much is a need in Web3, if not a bigger need, because you have these communities. I do think in Web3, the product manager and the community manager roles are going to be mixed up. I don't think you can be a great product manager in Web3 by just running A/B tests or like doing the traditional stuff. You have to be a really great community manager too. You have to be able to talk to your community every day, understand what they want, and kind of like go down that path. And I think that's a good trend, because community managers have traditionally been underrated and underpaid. So it's good that these two roles are kind of merging together in Web3.
That sounds awesome, but also overwhelming at the same time. I feel like as a PM, you're so overwhelmed already that being a community manager and a product manager at the same time seems like a lot, but maybe we'll be able to find more efficient ways to do that.
Yeah, it's just about having discipline to not only spend 100% of your time talking to internal cross-functional people, but also talking to the actual customers in your community.
Speaking of mission and vision, your mission really, as of late, has been this goal of onboarding people to Web3. I think for many people, that's actually a bit of a vague concept in terms of what it means. So walk us through the problem that you identified and what you saw people looking for. And right now, what does that mean for you to help people onboard to Web3?
Yeah, so Web3 is kind of like a buzzword. And I think my primary goal is that I think a lot of people are getting to Web3 to speculate and to kind of make a quick buck. You know, they kind of buy a token, or they like, ape into some NFT. And I think this space right now is kind of like the Wild West. And I really want the space to move from speculation to actually providing real utility, because that's when you can actually, cross the chasm and onboard the masses to the space, right? So I spent a lot of time, because I'm a writer, just like writing a lot of education on like, oh, how do you set up a wallet? How do you secure a wallet? How do you actually figure out which NFT to buy? Or how do you start investigating this stuff? Because it's very easy for someone new to either like just roll out the space, or to just have a bad experience. Like they can, have their private key stolen, or like they get scammed by quote unquote MetaMask support. It's like so easy to have a bad experience that I think you really need a guided path. And I think education is really important until the product itself actually catches up. Like if the product is so intuitive that you can just like onboard yourself, then you don't need a lot of education. But I think the space is not quite there yet right now.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So obviously speculation is at an all-time high, but what does it mean to move towards more of a utility-based world? What are some of those key utility factors that you want people to understand about the world of Web3?
Yeah, so for example, like with NFTs, right now, a lot of the volume is just a couple of traders like flipping JPEGs, right? They're trying to make a quick buck. The application is so broad. One particular application I'm excited about is I love for that to become a membership pass that creators and brands use to engage their, super fans and engage their community, as opposed to just something they try to flip to make a quick profit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, can you give us an example of that and how it looks like?
Yeah, so like a good example is, okay, so like a couple of examples. I used to work at Twitch. So if you're a top Twitch streamer in Web2, you would rely on subscriptions that Twitch provides, right? And like if Twitch changes the take rates, if Twitch all of a sudden decides to take 70% instead of 50% of your revenue, you can't really do anything about it. It's kind of stuck. So with NFTs, so like a good example is actually Gary Vee. He made this NFT project called V Friends. And he issued like, I think like 10,000 NFTs to his community. And instead of just like, straight up art, he actually provides utility with NFTs. So he's organizing a conference called VCon, where all the NFT holders get access to come listen to a bunch of speakers, Snoop Dogg, and so on. And it just makes them feel like part of the community, and makes them feel like part of the process. And it's owned by, Gary Vee and his community. It's not owned by any particular tech platform, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think he also has a restaurant in New York or something. It's probably unlocked by the same NFT that he mints, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the great thing is like, the NFT is just a tool. It's really up to the creator and community what kind of utility they want to provide with the NFT, right? The NFT is just like a proof of ownership. the sky's the limit in terms of what kind of benefits and perks. And it doesn't have to be Web3 related. It can be a restaurant, a conference. It can be anything.
Okay, so let's break this down for a second. So there's the NFT side of potentially granting access to your community of something. How is that tied to tokens? Can you explain that a little bit more?
Okay, well, the NFT is technically a token. It's a non-fungible token, which is basically like a unique token, right? When you're saying tokens, you're probably referring to like fungible tokens, like coins and stuff. I personally think NFTs are better for creator and communities to get started with than tokens. If I issued a Peter token, like it doesn't have a lot of personality, and people can easily speculate on buy and sell Peter tokens and speculate on the price. The NFT is a little bit more personalized. Like I can add my branding to it, and I can decide people who hold my NFT, like what they actually get. So it just feels like more of a tight-knit community than like a token anybody can buy and sell. You see these projects like Bored Apes, they have a bunch of NFT drops in the beginning, and then eventually they issue like the ape token, right? So it's kind of like a subsequent step. But I think most creators should start with NFTs, not start with issuing tokens.
I actually really like that point. It's sort of a more inverted model, right? You start with the NFTs, and then once there is actually traction, then there's more of a currency through just regular tokens to transact and, acquire new types of NFTs within the community.
Yeah, exactly. With NFTs, you can really limit it. The initial drop, you can really consider limited to like your most passionate fans. You can do like 1,000 or 100 or something. And once that proves it can appreciate value of your community, then you can do more drops. You just have more control than dropping like 10 million tokens that you have no idea what's going to happen.
I do want to anchor into this whole idea of creator-driven NFTs for a second. Beyond Gary Vee, who is like a huge person in the industry, have you seen smaller creators be successful with creating NFTs for their community? And do you have any tips and tricks to what the process is going to look like and how a creator can actually succeed in doing so? Because it feels a little bit cumbersome right now, right? You probably have to have a team to help you out.
Yeah. So I think if you're a new creator, like you shouldn't come out, unless you're like an artist or something, you shouldn't come out and just like drop NFT collection immediately. Like there's some prerequisites, like you need to have an audience. You ideally need to have like your own community of like people who really love your stuff, right? So that's kind of like the prerequisite. Once you have that, I recommend like kind of like building in public and just working with your community on the NFT drop. So talking about, sharing some mocks, finding like artists to partner with you, and like just like talking to the community about like, what are some perks that will resonate with you. Just kind of being transparent. Eventually you can do the drop. And you have to be very careful here because the market is very speculative. So you want to make sure that people who are your true fans actually can get the NFT ahead of time. So you want to do like stuff like whitelisting or like giveaways to try to make sure that like a good portion of NFTs is actually going to be purchased by the community as opposed to like a bunch of people. I mean, the traders help in terms of like getting the price to go up, but like you don't want most of your NFTs to be owned by traders who will try to flip it, right? So that's another thing. And the most important thing is you have to follow through. I see a lot of creators and brands dropping NFTs and then it's kind of like they don't do anything afterwards.
Yeah.
And then it just appears to be a quick cash grab. And you have to know that most of your fans probably are pretty skeptical of NFTs in the first place because of all the scams and stuff that's going on in the industry. So you just have to follow through and actually provide real utility. So you have to make it like a long-term thing as opposed to like a quick cash grab.
I like the idea of more creators just creating like utility-driven NFTs because it becomes a collectible, right? Maybe I love Billie Eilish and you love Olivia Rodrigo, and it doesn't matter. I don't want to trade my Billie Eilish NFT because I just love Billie Eilish, right? It's not about flipping it anymore. It's just about your devotion to somebody you love.
Yeah, exactly. Like your real fan, like it'd be nice if the thing went up in price, but your real fans should just feel proud to be part of this community and like participate in a conversation with you.
Yeah, I do want to talk a little bit about the price though. So let's say, people stopped caring that much about a NFT price. It's less about, participating in the marketplace, stuff like that. Should the creators still care about the price? Like, let's talk about how the price would impact an actual creator, right? Does it or does it not?
I mean, a creator has to make a living, right?
Right.
They don't have a tech job like us. They have to actually sustain themselves by just creating stuff. So for the creator, it does matter. Like they care about, if they're relying on NFTs primarily to make a living, like the price and like the number of transactions, secondary sales, all matters. And I think, NFTs can replace traditional subscriptions. Subscriptions for a lot of creators are like bread and butter income. If you do an NFT, hopefully there's like an ongoing income stream where people kind of like buy and sell your stuff so that you can sustain yourself without having to just like constantly do drops all the time.
I really hope in some ways it can even replace merch when there are more opportunities to display the NFTs that you actually have and own. Potentially that becomes the equivalent of having, you know, a poster in your wall, and instead you'll just have a poster in the metaverse. It's so easy to jump to NFTs right away, but taking a step back, usually wallets are the gateway to Web3. That's the first encounter with the actual technology of the blockchain. So can you talk about the significance of wallets beyond how people are viewing it today, which is just a headache for you to basically onboard to anything that you actually really want to get to?
One of the biggest opportunities in crypto is like the fiat to crypto on ramp. The wallet is kind of like your central hub. Like it's almost like your digital identity if it does well. It can be where you store your assets. It can be where you showcase the NFTs or the stuff that you're actually proud of. It can also be eventually a Web2 model. It can be like a social network. You can have interactions with other wallets. You can form communities of other wallets, right? So there's like a lot of potential there. I mean, I think right now the immediate problem is that a lot of people don't even make the jump to get their own self-custodial wallet. They just have their account in like an exchange and they just buy some Bitcoin. And there needs to be a way to directly use your credit card, buy some crypto in a wallet, and get some NFTs and just start doing stuff there. Because like if you don't have a wallet, there's like really not much you can do in Web3.
Yep.
You're just kind of like holding a token and hopefully it appreciates in value. So yeah, getting more people to have a wallet is like really important.
So can you tell us about what's wrong with having a wallet inside a existing exchange or marketplace?
Like everything is gray in my opinion. You don't actually own your private key. So if the exchange decides to deplatform you or something, like all of a sudden you could lose access to your assets, right? But owning your keys, like with great power comes great responsibility. If you actually own your keys, there's like a whole industry out there trying to scam you from giving up your keys, right? So like, I don't think this like key model is super sustainable. I don't think giving people like a bunch of random words that they have to remember and not get scammed is like good enough security. I feel like in the future, wallets will have a mix between Web2 and Web3 security. Like maybe you have the private key, but you have to do like two-factor auth to get it, or maybe like multiple people hold pieces of your key so that, part of it gets revealed, like you don't just lose all your assets. There needs to be a better way to do it than just like remembering your 12-word CC phrase.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. You mentioned a bit about the social aspects of the wallet and even making that into the future of social networks and social utility, identity, all of that. I think you might have blown some people's brains with that. So can you explain how a wallet can ultimately become your social identity within Web3 and give a few examples of how that's already showing up?
What's the difference in like a Web3 social network and a Web2 social network? The difference is that for better or for worse, in Web3, everybody can see the transactions you're making in your wallet, right? Like I can go to Etherscan or somewhere and just look up all of your past transactions. If I lost like a bunch of money on DeFi, people can just find that out.
Right.
So that's the difference. That level of transparency is like really important to have that level of trust. But also, I feel like for a wallet to become like a Web3 social network, it has to be really like 10x better than like a Twitter or like an existing Web2 social network. It can just be like the same thing with like the whole like transaction history. I don't think that's going to do it because of the really strong network effects that the Web2 social networks have. So maybe the future is like the Web2 social networks themselves become a Web3 social network. Maybe that's the future as opposed to like a new upstart.
Do you mean maybe you start to be able to connect your wallet to your Twitter account or whatever account that you already have, and so those two worlds start to bridge together? Yeah,
those sources bridge together. Another unique thing about Web3 is that the transaction history is transparent, but the identity is actually not transparent, right? Like you just have like a wallet address, unless of course you like add like a ENS domain like peter.eth or something. But I personally have multiple wallets. Like some of them I use to buy NFTs, sometimes I use to do DeFi. So it goes to the metaverse concept where you want to have a different identity for different aspects of your life. Mm-hmm. Maybe like the wallet will support that. I don't think people want to necessarily know Peter A is like equal to Peter B. Like I don't know if people want to like keep their keep their identities a little bit separate.
I think there's a pretty huge ethical and philosophical element to this, because if someone were to follow my credit card transactions on a day-to-day basis, that's extremely dangerous, no matter how anonymous my identity is. So this idea of merging your social identity with your financial identity is both very compelling and interesting, but also extremely, extremely scary.
Yeah, I mean, people are already doing this. They're finding these big wallets and they're trying to target them with scams, like social engineering projects.
Well, I'm also thinking about like a more futuristic use case where there's a lot more strategy. Like say it's your investment strategy, or like you actually have your day-to-day job in Web3 where you're constantly transacting or you're constantly providing services to people. People can reverse engineer your livelihood strategy, right? Or your investment strategy and just start to copycat that, which is crazy. Let's move on from wallets and talk about something that you know really, really well, which is DAOs. Can you give us a background to how you decided to start Odyssey DAO? How did it go from having a Substack blog to creating a Discord and a community, and then now a fully functioning DAO?
I started learning about sometime last year, and I wrote this article called Curious Beginner's Guide to Crypto. People really resonated with it. So I thought, okay, I should write more of this. But instead of just me writing about myself, wouldn't it be great if I could have a community of people to learn about crypto together, go on this journey together? I already had an audience by then, so it was pretty easy for me to like, hey, join my Discord server, join my community. I think like 3,000, 4,000 people immediately showed up to the community. And then I was like, hey guys, let's write about crypto together. And in the first few months, it was like pretty, it was kind of depressing because like a lot of people were there. You know how Discord can be, right? A lot of people were like lurking there and actually not doing anything. So it was mostly just me like talking to myself in this community of like 3,000 people. So in the beginning, it was very difficult. I was doing all the work, but slowly and surely, like people stepped up. Someone stepped up and designed the website to house all the education stuff that we're writing. Someone else stepped up to just build the website on Webflow. Maybe out of the 3,000 people, maybe like 5 people stepped up. It's not like a lot, but those 5 key people were what it took to go from this like random Discord community to like a DAO. And like it became a DAO after we decided to do like a small fundraise. We used this platform called Mirror to do a fundraise. I got a friend to do a bunch of NFTs for us, and we were able to raise like 100K to continue to make the DAO happen. After that, I was able to kind of like try to formalize a little bit, get like a core team together. And, you know, similar to how PMs have like quarterly planning, have like quarters where we try to get stuff done, try to go from there. It's still very much an experiment. I'm just trying to figure stuff out, but it seems to be going pretty well.
Congratulations. Speaking of the couple of people who actually came out and just decided to do pretty like meaty projects for the DAO, I always believe that there has to be good incentives for people to participate. What were some of those profiles? Like, why were these people wanting to contribute to this DAO as opposed to another DAO?
I really think the mission was super important, like the mission to bring a million people to Web3. People really care about that mission and kind of the inclusivity. Some of these people are people that I knew before, like people that I worked with before. So I think personal reputation matters a little bit, but I wouldn't overemphasize on that. Like one of our major contributors, she lives in Singapore and I have no clue who she was before. And she just decided to put some Figma files together and like her work was like really great. So like a lot of it was like intrinsic motivation to get started. Of course, after we raised like 100K, I tried to pay them like a menial salary, some sort of economic reward for their work. Yeah, a lot of it's just intrinsic. And they own some like Odyssey tokens. I'm trying not to like get a lot of people to speculate on it right now, but they can use that token to vote on proposals and stuff. So there is like a sense of ownership too.
Speaking of the fundraising round, what did that look like? Was it just the selling of the community token and the NFTs that were able to finalize that round, or like what was the source of funding?
Yeah, so we had like a bunch of NFTs in the tiers, like 0.1 ETH all the way up to 1 ETH. And we actually did a soft launch in the community before the public launch. And the NFTs basically sold out in the soft launch. Somehow like word got out, random communities do a crowdfund. And a lot of people just came in and bought the NFTs. And some of these people are great. Some of these people are like the most immediate thing they said after buying the NFTs was they came to a community and were asking about, hey, when are we going to provide liquidity for the tokens and for the NFTs? Because they want to flip the NFTs. They want to speculate, basically, right? So I really had to, with other people, discourage that behavior. And because this is like an education community. It's not about trying to flip stuff. I think if I could do this again, I would probably like be more careful, like I mentioned before, making sure that the people who own the NFTs are actually people who, as much as I can, people who like I think are really good people. It's almost like putting people on a cap table, right? Like people
Right. Yeah.
who I really trust and people who I think will be great contributors. So probably have a more leader process to try to get people to pre-list for the NFTs as opposed to just like be a free for all.
That's super interesting. So another question around the whole entire funding round is, did the valuation kind of go down, or were you able to sort of cash out, actually put in the bank, like make sure there's more stability to the funding round?
Well, the way that this platform is set up is like, people use ETH to buy the NFTs, and then all the ETH gets put into a shared treasury for the DAO. So the price goes up and down with the ETH, but it's not as crazy as like a custom. Like there's also like a custom token, but the custom token, it doesn't have any liquidity, so it doesn't really have any value. When I say liquidity, I mean like you can't actually swap an Odyssey token with ETH, right? Like no one has supplied the liquidity pool to allow that to happen. So there isn't a ton of speculation on the token itself.
Interesting. When it comes to the people that bought your NFTs, how much of their identity are you able to gauge? Or is it extremely, extremely anonymous? Because going back to your point, in the future, you probably want to know or get a better sense of who's on your cap table. But what data points do you even have at this point?
I literally only have their public wallet address, right? Like some of them have their name on it, like, whatever, Annie.eth. But like a lot of people just have a random string of characters.
That seems like a very good opportunity area for the future.
Yes, definitely. As long as people join the community, some of the backers probably are even part of the community. They just like bought the NFT. So I have no clue.
Interesting. And then I want to talk about payouts. So now that this is sort of a funded startup, how do you think about payouts to contributors? And how do you think about that as it converts to maybe the community token? Like, is it by task? Is it by role? Or is there some consistency to what they can expect?
So it's not like fully decentralized. So basically, I'm just trying to figure out as I go. But basically, like, it becomes pretty obvious who are the 5 to 10 people in the community who are actually doing a ton of work. The core contributor team, we make like a spreadsheet with a list of people that we think should get compensated. We kind of like talk about, we want this DAO to be sustainable. So like, how much can we afford to actually pay? And like, just like put a bunch of numbers on there. And then, we do try to make it like a DAO thing where like we actually get the community to make a vote. So we get community like, hey, this is like a spreadsheet with a lot of people want to pay and like the payouts. Do you agree, yes or no? Thankfully, people vote yes. So I was able to just like pay them some ETH and some tokens.
I see.
Yeah.
This brings us to a good point about the tension between centralized decision-making or decentralization. To your point about when you started the DAO, it was still mostly you doing stuff and talking and facilitating, making decisions until a few started to jump on board. What does it mean for you now to still be the lead of Odyssey DAO?
Maybe this is going to be like a little controversial, but I really think that whether you're at a DAO or a company, you have to empower small teams to do their best work. Like, I think if you just have like 5,000 people going like, 100 different directions, you're probably not going to get anything done. So I think you still need to have like some sort of a high level, strategy or like something there. And then you just kind of like give ownership to the smaller teams, to the team leads to figure out their part of the pie. I think the main difference is that people who are really good organically come out from the community. Like it's not like you're like pre-assigned a bunch of roles. You just kind of like figure out what you're good at and talented at, and you'll get recognized.
Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about just the process and the setup. So if you were to give step-to-step guide to someone who wants to start a DAO today, what should they think about? What are the key steps and what are some of the key challenges that they have to overcome?
So the first step is make sure you have a great community where people are actually contributing and like good discussions. Another piece of advice is like, don't try to grow the community too fast. Like you can consider starting small. You need to have that really strong core to make the community valuable to people who are lurkers or people who are just kind of like passively consuming. The second thing is the thing about whether you actually want to make a DAO or not. Like DAO comes with a lot of logistics and overhead to manage the treasury and to do all this stuff. Maybe you just want a community where people can hang out and just like have fun. But if you want to do a DAO, then you can basically use one of these tools or like just issue a bunch of NFTs or tokens and make sure the people you actually respect in the community like get priority access to tokens because they're basically people on your cap table or like co-owners of your DAO. And then, kind of go from there. And then once you have that, you can work with your community to figure out what the next steps are for your DAO. Like you should try to figure out like what are the top 3 priority areas that you want to tackle so that you don't just go in like 20 different directions.
Can you talk about the logistical aspects? Literally, what is something that you depend on, another tool, whether it's the legality part of it, whether it's the treasury part of it, or anything else?
Like I mentioned, I use Mirror for the crowdfund. There's other platforms out there too. I use Notices for the treasury that me and a few other people manage. And then in terms of payouts, I've been using this, I can't remember the name of the tool right now, but there's tools out there where, because it's a huge pain to pay out people one by one and pay the gas each time. There's tools out there where you can just like make a bulk payout and have it all done automatically. And some of them will even waive the gas fee. So that's pretty important. Other than that, I mean, a lot of stuff we do in the DAO is just like typical PM one-on-one stuff. Like you have a Discord, you have Google Docs, you have a Notion, you have like a Figma, like the basic stuff to actually get work done. It's not that unique for that DAO.
I see. Are there like support groups for DAO creators or any resources that are helpful for people who are trying to onboard?
There are like articles and stuff, but like there is this thing called CC Club started by Jesse, where it's kind of like a DAO accelerator. So like if you want to do a DAO, like they'll walk you through it, and then in exchange they'll take like some % of your treasury tokens. So that's worth checking out. I mean, the most important resource is like going on Twitter and asking them questions.
That's actually funny. Twitter as the new forum for Web3 questions. This might be a tough question for you to answer, but at this point, having done all the work that you have with the DAO, and obviously it's seen incredible success, do you think that is worth it? And what are some of the next steps?
I believe every DAO has a core team of people who are like almost full time, who are like really committed. To me, like the best part of this DAO is actually finding that core team of like random people that I didn't know before. And sometimes people can come in and out, but like there's people, like 5 or 6 people who are really committed. And working with them has been like a joy. It's been great to build this DAO with them. In terms of what's next, so we need to make this DAO sustainable, viable economically. So we did an initial NFT drop. We're planning another drop later this summer. That's a little bit more broad. Like we'll have a few thousand NFTs, and we're trying to provide some real utility for people who buy the NFTs. Like if you get the NFT, you will get access to like a cohort course and like some other stuff. So we'll see how it goes, but that's what we're planning next.
Nice. It almost sounds like starting a DAO and the whole entire process, it's right now a great learning process to figure out like, what is this new method of working together? I think that's probably what a lot of people are moving towards. And you guys are the ones who are the cowboys going to the Wild West. But what it seems to me like it's trending towards is that it's going to start to look kind of like startups. Maybe the way in which you collaborate, maybe the way in which people onboard and the kind of tools that you guys use are going to be different. But DAOs should not be like 10,000 people communities with 99% lurkers all the time. That's not really sustainable. It probably should be a very engaged set of people that actually collaborate on a day-to-day, and it scales slowly, not quickly, because that's how companies work, right?
Yeah, it's gonna blur. Like, I mean, even as a startup, I think you should have a community, right? You should have a community around a startup of customers you can talk to, and maybe people who start doing that work. So I feel like it's gonna blur a little bit more.
What are the key drawbacks with DAOs that make you actually crave how traditionally governed corporations work?
One drawback is just like, you and I know how hard it is to organize just like a team of 8 engineers. But like if you're trying to organize like a 5,000 person community, it just adds a lot of overhead, and there's like a lot of work to respond to community questions, to try to guide them to the right path. So it just causes a lot of work. It's kind of worth it to stay in touch with the customer, but it's definitely like a lot of work. That's one drawback. Second drawback is that you don't actually know who is good or not. like maybe like a lot of people want to design an NFT or something, right? How do I know whether this random Discord name is actually a great designer? And you don't want them to do a bunch of work and then tell them like, hey, this is actually not good enough. So hey, we can't use this and we're not going to pay you anything, right? That's kind of just like that, a waste of work. So again, it goes back to organizing stuff. Just trying to figure out who's actually really talented and trying to fit into the right roles is a challenge. It just causes a lot of overhead.
We've walked through wallets, which is very beginner, NFTs and the whole entire NFT world, and then DAOs. And those are all sort of user-facing products within Web3, if we were to put it in PM terms. I want to talk a bit about L1s and L2s because that's almost like the B2B layer or like the infrastructure layer. So can you explain what L1, L2s are and then the opportunities that they present for people if people are creators or entrepreneurs and they want to dabble in Web3 in a more back-end way.
And L1 is like layer one. So it's like the default base layer of the blockchain. The main L1 that most people use is Ethereum. And L2 is something that's kind of built on top of the blockchain. So it processes a bunch of transactions and then it groups them and it puts them onto the main blockchain. L2 is mostly for Ethereum. Example of L2 is Polygon or like Optimism or something. And like, what's the point of all of this? The problem is Ethereum is by far the most popular, and Ethereum is very expensive to process transactions. Like, you pay like a ton of money on gas to make even a small transaction. So therefore, there's a bunch of alternative L1 chains like Solana and L2 like Polygon to make it easier and cheaper and faster to process these transactions. And there's like use cases like gaming. That's pretty much like impossible on Ethereum, right? Because it's like, I don't want to pay like, $20 or like $200 each time I do something in a game. That'll be terrible. I think in the future, it'd be a lot easier to on-ramp to use L2s. And you already seen this happen. Like Polygon is becoming very popular for gaming and some of these other use cases. And I think most of the consumer activity will start happening on L2s or like cheaper L1s as opposed to Ethereum.
Obviously, it's like a emergent class of solutions, but what are some ideas that you have around interesting L2 solutions that people might want to build for that are extremely valuable for creators and users? Gaming, obviously, a huge one.
Yeah, gaming is a huge one. Buying tickets for IRL events, doing a bunch of like airdrops for your fans. Like if you own my NFT, maybe I want to drop a badge NFT or like some other stuff. Like if I had to pay like $100 to do that airdrop on Ethereum, like I probably won't do it, right? But if the transaction is free, then yeah, why not? Like the internet in Web2 today, you can like process a ton of transactions per second. So like Web3 has to get there if it hopes to have mass adoption.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, let's zoom out and talk about education and the metaverse. So you're in the educational space. Obviously, a lot of what we're talking about and what you're educating about is how to get people more and more closer to this metaverse vision. What do you see as the progression of education in this space, and how is it going to look like more and more in the metaverse?
I actually really like your definition of the metaverse. Like people think of metaverse is some sort of 3D space game thing. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I think your definition is that it's just like it's like a place where there's a lot of communities where people have a strong sense of purpose, they belong, right? That's the definition. Then I think education is just like another part of it. Like I think people learn best together with other like-minded people for stuff that they actually care about. So for Odyssey, we're trying to build a really great Web3 education community. And hopefully it spawns a lot of other communities or projects moving forward to bring more people into the space.
Do you see like more emergent formats too? Right now, we're still very much in like that text-based world where you're learning through blogs and writing, and you're learning through maybe communities where you're like Slacking or just like Discord channel playing with each other, getting onto audio calls. Is that something you see progressing? Is the format and the method of learning as well?
I think it should definitely progress. I mean, I personally learn best by just like doing things.
Yeah.
I mean, I started a DAO to learn how to do DAO. Like I believe in like project-based learning. So maybe it's still through like Discord and stuff, but like, or maybe it's like through some like 3D metaverse VR thing. Getting people to do like projects together and like learn along the way is like what I really believe in. And I'll just say one more thing, right? I feel like a lot of students and kids, they feel like they need to go attend like a great college and like do all these extracurriculars, get 4.0. And when I was in high school, stuff I was learning was not stuff I was actually passionate about, right? Like I was passionate about game design and this other stuff. So if kids these days can actually find their education community, and if in the future these communities have the same reputation and the same cachet as like a Harvard or something, it will broaden the creativity of people by a lot. Like, so people don't feel like they have to all try to get into just like 1% Ivy League school. Making projects and start doing good work for the world way earlier in their careers.
I love that. And I totally agree with that. And maybe there's more mobility, right? You go to this DAO to learn this, and then you go to this other thing to try out that.
Yeah.
So there's more diversity in picking your own adventure. Awesome. Well, I have one last fun question for you because this is pretty relevant. In a world where there's going to be a decentralized Twitter, what is a feature that you'd be the most excited about?
Yeah, that's a really good question. A very practical thing is for all my followers, I'm able to actually take them somewhere else instead of trying to like get them to subscribe to my Substack newsletter.
I'm sure Twitter would love that.
Yeah, I'm able to just like take them somewhere else if I want. But it's actually kind of scary to decentralize Twitter. Anyway, it's like a longer conversation about free speech and everything. But like, I mean, if it's truly decentralized, there's going to be less moderation and control theoretically. Just should be like a bunch of crazy shit happening on the platform. And maybe you can like block them, but I'm a little bit worried about what people can do if they have the audience and there's not a lot of control.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, just to your point, like I'm worried about the fragmentation of a really solid platform. If you do decide to just sever your ties with Twitter and take all of your users, that's not going to be good for Twitter. And yeah, I think if there's too much information, too much data, there's not going to be enough time to actually regulate, and you're just going to be inundated with information. Well, thank you so much. This was almost a user interview with someone who's front and center in Web3, and just my entrepreneurial mind is racing with all these potential ideas for the industry, and I'm sure a lot of listeners will benefit from that as well. That was Peter Yang, founder of Odyssey DAO. You can find him on Twitter at Peter G. Yang, or you can subscribe to his blog at creatoreconomy.so. If you like this episode, please leave a review in your podcast app of choice. As always, thank you for listening. This is your host, Annie Zhang, and I will see you in 2 weeks.